did hear from Jack. I guess we'll get going. Jack will join us when he joins. All right, so this calling to order the meeting of the Bylaw Committee of May 22nd. Roll call, alphabetical roll call. Who's here?
Clark Brewer's here.
Tom Callahan.
David Farag's here.
David Farag. And I'll start with the news that Cassandra is officially Lauren's successor as the town planner as of today.
Congratulations, Lauren.
Wow, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very, very well deserved, and I'm going to be well served by that. And anyway, for tonight's meeting, let's jump right in. Let me get minutes out of the way before we have everybody else here. We have minutes of the 19th, April 19th and May 8th to approve. Can I have a motion? Anybody?
I haven't looked at them, but I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
All right, thank you. Anybody second? Cassandra, Jack is emailing that he needs the Zoom link. If you wouldn't mind
Perfect.
sending it to him.
Yes, I will resend that to him now.
All right, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye, Clark Brewer.
Aye. Tom
Aye.
Callahan, aye. Okay, good. Minutes of that. All right, so just to recap, last meeting, we talked about a few things. Actually, I will share this. Hold on a sec. Let me share the screen and bring up those minutes. So those of you who weren't here can see what we were mucking about with. Can everybody see that? Where's my cursor? Why can't I move this? Ugh, I hate this. There it is. Okay. So we went over town meeting. No need to keep going over it. We brought up some issues of some studies that we may want to do going forward. We didn't make any decisions on those, but we'll wait on that until something else that I'm going to discuss is coming up within a month. We discussed housing choice. Since that time, when we started to discuss it, you know, I had said, Judge Cutler, that you and I had spoken briefly before town meeting about making sure, you know, it would be advisable to get the consensus of all the boards about this, you know, before we make major policy decisions, so that we have some direction to go in rather than taking a direction ourselves. So to that end, we started to discuss housing choice amongst us. We discussed it at the planning board meeting that followed on the 10th. The planning board was, Clark, you correct me if I'm wrong, we discussed a few things, but
We were trying to draw some response to whether we wanted to go big, be
yeah,
minimalist, and then see what options were available to us. Some people, I think, on the board just wanted to do what the state told us to do.
yeah, there is I mean, the planning board was, I think, unanimous in saying that we want to certainly comply with it.
I don't think there's a vote on that.
Yeah, anybody doesn't know, the Attorney General has issued like some not so veiled threats. So the state's going to take this seriously. But yeah, I think as I'm seeing in other forums in this board, planning board, and probably we'll hear from the select board that, you know, there's going to be a difference of how big we go with this or how minimal we comply with this. I will tell you that there was one person who's no longer a town official as of last week who said, well, we have the TOD district on 3A, which is about 5 acres, and we have the Avalon site, which is 42 acres. There's our 43 acres. That is the minimum number of acreage we have to comply with. But the likelihood that there would anything be torn down and built at any of those places is probably unrealistic. So we have to think about whether, you know, minimal compliance means we're not leaving any you know, realistic development in the future and whether the state would accept that, you know.
Well, there is room on the Avalon site for expansion,
Yeah,
and they
Yeah,
have
but-
sewer capacity, so that wouldn't be a false
but
offer.
no, but I also think Lauren said we're not gonna, at least at the moment, it's not clear that we would get to count the existing Avalon units. They are not at 15 units per acre. I think it's not even half that. So anyway, these are the kinds of things we're going to debate. And,
Okay, could I interrupt for a sec? Yeah, I think it's very clear that the select board is going to understand the challenges that we're facing. And I think what they'd like us to do is figure out a way to meet those challenges because it's not going to go away. So when we look at this, understand we're just going to figure out a way to make that consistent with Cohasset values. It's the same thing that we did when we were faced with the affordable housing thing some 10 years ago. Figure out a Cohasset solution. And that's what we can do. And we have enough talent in this board to be able to do that. So that's what we need to do.
And if you see from the minutes, Clark had brought up the idea of pocket neighborhoods and trying to look for some kind of development that doesn't, you know, lend itself to a concentrated series of high rises. And, you know, we would have to explore that with DHCD if there's any type of flexibility that we could have. I
Well,
imagine,
just for context, with 15 units per acre, that's 3,000 square feet of land per unit. So you can definitely do that with townhouses and row houses and
Yep.
kind of low scale projects.
yeah, so we'll again, the DHCD's process is still a work in progress, so we'll get through all of this. But to the end of talking about this as a policy matter with the select board, I have spoken to Jean Healy-Dippold, who's now the chair, and we're proposing a joint meeting with our committee and the select board on June 6th, which is a select board meeting night. So tentatively mark that on your calendars. We would schedule that as one of our board meetings as well. But what we want to do is talk about, you know, the two policy directions I had brought to their attention in the memo was this issue and then the issue of the future of the harbor. And on that score, I don't know if we'll get into that on the 6th, but, you know, there's certainly a sentiment from everyone that I've talked to about it not to expand the harbor into some of the bordering Residence C properties. But as I told you at the last meeting, there has been an inquiry about expanding mixed use to one of the Residence C properties. So
Who was that?
somebody made an inquiry about the Oaks.
Oh,
And
okay.
whether there'd be any stomach of extending the overlay district into that.
I can,
Yeah, I can tell you I was very non-committal to, you know, first of all, I couldn't make any decisions to begin with, but one of the two representatives of this company is a relatively new Cohasset resident, and I directed his attention to Cohasset 143's Facebook page and said, check out the sentiments of the community about the existing project that's going up. Just to recap, nobody on this committee or our predecessor has ever talked about expanding the harbor zoning to the two other waterfront Residence C properties. It's never been on the table. And just because a developer asks about it doesn't mean we have to put it on the table. As a matter of fact, you know, one of the main policy decisions for our rezoning is, do we expand mixed use in the harbor at all? Or do we just let what has happened has happened? There is still one parcel in the harbor that's within the overlay district that has not yet been redeveloped. And
which one is?
It's the remaining properties on the land side of Elm Street. I think they're number 97 and 99 or 97 and 101 or something like that. The buildings between the existing project on the land side of Elm Street and the Legion, that low.
Oh,
level.
okay.
Yeah, that was likely put into the overlay district to avoid any accusation of spot zoning, but it's still there.
I think it, it's contiguous with the other parcels. It wasn't arbitrarily put in. Since I was
No, but that would have been a good legal reason to do it. So
very involved.
yeah.
Interestingly enough, the consultant's first draft had waterfront multifamily for the whole waterfront. Instead of the overlay district that we came up with, and that was the initial concept, and the consultant didn't get it until we explained that we don't want to have condos lining the whole harbor. We're going to set it up for one project to see how it goes, and it could be expanded in the future. So
Yeah.
the goal was to, we understand that the hotel was a white elephant and that was ripe for redevelopment, but to allow as of right or by special permit mixed use development like that in the whole harbor was never a part of the plan, and I think it was a proceed with caution approach.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that I've yet to hear any sentiment within this committee, its predecessor, or just talking to people, or anybody who is proposing expanding mixed use throughout the harbor waterfront. So, but again, that's something I think we should have some input from other committees. I know that, Tim Davis of the Harbor Committee at least reached out to me and said he'll put it on an agenda, but I haven't heard from him about that yet. But it's the select board and the planning board that we should really get some policy direction from. So the focus of the meeting on the 6th with the select board will be housing choice first, and if we have time to get to harbor, we will. As far as the planning board goes, I think, we have some direction from the planning board, details to be filled in later. And hopefully at our next planning board meeting on the 31st, we'll have time to talk about the harbor a little bit, but we'll see. So, and then we talked a little about my ideas for the zoning and Article 3 and consolidating districts, renaming districts, kind of, ending downtown business as a district once and for all. So, again, that's something we'll get into a little further. Tonight, I really wanted to focus on starting us on our discussions of Article 4. We also talked about the surveys that I had put together. I got some feedback from one of you or two of you. One of the feedback things just stopped me in my tracks because it was making this more complicated than it needs to be. But I'd like to get these surveys out. And what we had decided was putting out Survey Monkey or whatever Justin will put it out. I wouldn't do it on 143, one of their polls, but some survey on the future of accessory dwellings, short-term rentals, and harbor zoning. And the funny thing about the short-term rentals is that all of a sudden, I've seen since that last meeting a lot of ads about short-term rentals on 143. People who are looking to rent their house for the summer or looking for a place to rent for the summer. So I think the policy challenge is going to be distinguishing between the commercial Airbnbs of the world and then what has traditionally probably occurred in Cohasset for a long time is seasonal rentals that are just direct, homeowner to whoever they're renting it to. So I'll see that those get out so that we at least get started with some research on that.
So this would be a townwide survey?
Yeah, I would have Justin do it. I don't know. The town likes to use that Survey Monkey tools. I wouldn't put it on 143 only because Justin's not in control of that process.
It's not an accurate survey. It's,
Yeah,
I will tell you that generally in that particular industry, there's growing opposition to communities being inundated with a lot of them. There are a lot of smaller investors who used to buy a 3-family. Now they'll buy a single or something like that, and they'll parse it out a week at a time. It can be very, very profitable. You'll see in financing, there'll be things on a loan application as to what's your income from the previous year. So it is a very strong and very, it can be very profitable. It can also be very, very dangerous to an existing neighborhood. So I think that this is something that we ought to be paying a lot of attention to, and we need to address it in the zoning code. And I think it's going to be a larger discussion than we just need to do. We're really going to have to make sure the town knows it, so.
yeah, no, and like I said, it's people that we probably know on 143 putting up houses for rent for the summer.
Sure.
And, we, you know, and then this will be for Judge Cutler to help us with, is making these legal fine distinctions between doing it commercially through an Airbnb or Vrbo or anything like that versus, you know, our neighbors who maybe winter in Florida up here in the summer, or you know, people who are going away for the summer somewhere and renting their house for the summer. We have to distinguish between that, and then how you distinguish between a, you know, homeowner and a investor homeowner. You know, we're going to have some fine legal points to think about.
It's the same problem that we have with like developer-driven projects and homeowner-driven projects. We have the same rules that apply to both. I don't know if there's a way to differentiate those owner-occupied.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of it has to do with the definitions.
Yeah,
We could have
So short-term rental,
primary residence or something like that as.
it could be a short-term rental could be allowed as an accessory use, and there are going to be limitations, obviously, on what accessory is for an owner-occupied property.
Right.
That would be one thing, and it would have to be. I know there's at least one town, and I think they got theirs passed through the Attorney General, who distinguished between properties that were owned by sort of persons and properties owned by corporations.
that's an interesting one.
Because you had to have an owner occupant. So, you know, at least one member of the corporation, I guess, would have to live in the property as a principal use, so that there's certainly some ways around it. But I think the idea being that once the town decides whether it wants to generally allow investor-owned properties to be used for short-term rentals in this fashion, you know, as Jack pointed out, this sort of VRBO model, or whether you want to restrict it to being just an accessory use to an owner-occupied dwelling. And then you can put limits on it, how many times a year or how many days a year or something of that nature. But it's hard to keep track of, because you really, a lot of this stuff happens in the shadows. You really don't know all the time what's going on. There is a statute actually, and I don't think the town has it, but under the the excise tax statute, there is a special provision for municipalities to adopt either, I guess it would be not a zoning bylaw, but a general bylaw for the licensing of short-term rentals and establishing certain regulations under that with limitations, and how many licenses can be issued, or how many licenses can be issued to a single property owner. so that you can't have somebody who owns, 6 properties, renting them all out, and it's clearly, an investment situation. So that there are various ways to address it, but I don't think you can completely overcome the waterfall effect of the last couple of years, short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Oh, it's become, that was very astute. Thank you. And it's become a very, very growing business. A lot of small investors are doing it. A lot of people are doing a number of them. They're buying properties with the express intent of doing that. So we need to, well, I think so we can move this meeting along, but the answer is this is something we need to kind of silo off. And number one, we need to alert, and I will do this, alert the select board that it needs to be, dealt with some degree of seriousness. And I don't think that we can, in our zoning bylaw, we can work on it, but I think we've got to get everything doing, but we need another mechanism to deal with this because it's pretty extensive.
Well, we will need to deal with the select board on a number of policy issues. So again, we'll alert them on the 6th, but we might not discuss it on the 6th, but we certainly can discuss it thereafter. But Judge Cutler, tomorrow, you probably saw it once before, but I want to make sure that this initial survey, while not being complicated, also asks direct questions about these various splitting hair distinctions between who owns the property and how they're renting it. So I'll run the survey by you again after I get back from court tomorrow.
Okay.
Before that one goes out the door, because I want to make sure we get a really good sentiment of the town on this in that initial. There'll certainly be a lot of discussion about this, but that initial survey, I want to make sure it captures the defined distinctions that we have to make with that one. All right. Also, what else was I going to say? Oh, my other discussion with Jean is, I guess, Jack, you can correct me. The track of fall town meeting seems to be back towards December, which is good news for us, for the time that we need to do things. We also discussed, and this will probably be a topic on the 6th of.
I can just address that briefly. The whole idea of having another one earlier was to deal with financing issues exclusively. It would not supplant the regular one. So I think we're very comfortable doing what we're going to do at that meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. I was concerned based on some comments people made, privately outside these meetings, that the December one was going to be junked in favor of one in September, and we'd have to be ready to go with things in September.
No, the whole purpose of that was that the September, which may still happen, is to deal with funding issues for schools and roads and sidewalks, et cetera, and so on. But it would have been, and it may still happen, purely financial, and the regular town business would be at the regular one in December. So we're all set.
Yeah. So we'll discuss that with them. That'll be a topic. But so we're going to continue to operate that. We're on the timeline of a December town meeting, which means we'd have to have everything ready to go for the vetting, the statutory vetting, by the end of September. So, and then, Jean and I discussed about how much we're going to bite off. And, I was been pushing to do this in 2 town meetings. It's certainly not going to happen. I think we should still do as much as we can, but because changes to one part of the bylaw begets changes to the other, it's hard to split it up too much. But certainly any new initiatives, we discussed this before, on climate change and resiliency is a spring 24 thing at the earliest. Housing choice, if we really have the deadline, and originally I thought the deadline was the end of 2023, but it's apparently the end of 2024. So housing choice may come later. And depending on how easily we deal with Article 4, Article 5 is going to take a lot of work, and particularly if we propose changes that have been discussed in this committee and its predecessor, it's going to take a lot of public input, which may be difficult to obtain during the course of the summer. And it's going to require some outside studies that we talked about last week. So Article 5 may need to wait till the spring, realistically, but if we make changes to Article 4, we probably have to do some fill-in changes of terminology, temporary changes of terminology within Article 5, which I don't think would be too difficult to do. But so let's start with Article 4, because I think we want to accomplish Article 4 as soon as we can. This is on the uses. And I circulated in the past some ideas, both the Article 4 itself and the table of uses. My thinking of Article 4 is that all the articles dealing with uses in one form or another should be within Article 4, which means bringing 15, 18, and if we eliminate mixed use in the harbor, we have to decide, is there anything in that bylaw, Article 22, that needs to survive because the hotel project will be there. So, but all of that. Village, harbor, anything special.
Sorry, Tom,
anything,
what hotel project?
the one down in the harbor. I'm suggesting that anything related to uses. I mean, this was one of the objectives of doing this, was that the bylaw has become a mess with all the add-on articles, but here's an opportunity. We have a special article for the village. We have a special use article for the harbor. We have a use article for ADUs. My thought is that it all gets into Article 4 in one shape rather than as standalone articles. That's one thought. The thought behind the table is simplicity. And then also today, the judge has given us her preliminary work. It's not a final product. Both giving us a preliminary draft of Article 4, her draft of it, and a comparison chart on the terminology that would be used. And again, I think she's operating from, correct me if I'm wrong, Judge Cutler, but operating from the same principle of simplicity in describing our broad uses rather than having the laundry list of things we have, where in the past there's been such hair splitting that, the common example is the Crazy Paws on 3A had to go to the court to get to
But
be
no, it
permitted.
was just a bylaw change. It wasn't court, Tom.
Well, I thought they went to
No,
court. Woody
we
has
had-
always, I thought
We had
Woody
to
was
wait
always-
6 months for a bylaw change. We changed the bylaw. Woody and I worked that out.
all right, well,
Just-
whatever,
Just took longer than they wanted to.
yeah,
Not
Right.
in court, not.
all right, Judge Cutler. Go ahead.
Yeah, just want to clarify, the portion of Article 4 that was sent out is only dealing with the principal uses at this point. So I
Yep.
carved out of your current list of uses, all those uses that I thought were principal, because right now your table of uses has a mixture of accessory and principal, and none of them are named. So they all come across as just uses allowed. So I tried to cull out those things that would most likely be the principal uses only. And the accessory uses dealt with separately, but the principal uses, that wasn't what I think that's Tom's table. I haven't drafted a
Yeah.
table yet, because that's something I think we put off at the end. So we make sure we're putting things where they belong. And so my concept was to try and reduce, I think I counted 68 separate entries of what I would consider principal uses in your current table. And each entry has about, 5, 6, 10 different things included, listed. Some of them are related, some of them are not. So I think in your comparison chart, what I tried to do is break down those things and
Right.
show what the new category could be that would encompass many of them and not have to list them individually. And then, of course, we have to put language in the bylaw, and I think I've proposed some language in the draft that I sent you that explains that all the uses that are listed, all the use categories are listed, are the only ones allowed. But if there's any use that fits, more than one, it's the more specific category that controls. So what we're trying to do is broaden the descriptions of the uses so that many, many things can fit into them. I think the challenge is to make sure that we've covered everything that you want covered and somehow strained out those things you really don't want. So, that's to me, and what I was going to do. So my proposal was that the next time that this committee sat down to really go into the weeds of all this, I would be happy to come sit with you, because I think of in face-to-face, thing with charts and, paper that we can scribble on would be the best. I wouldn't charge you for my travel time, but I think that an in-person visit might be more effective and efficient than doing it on Zoom, but that's up to you.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I think that would work.
rolling
So-
up sleeves and going through and having all the paper references right in front of us while we're working definitely makes sense to have the old language, the interim language.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
What I didn't understand was there were two approaches to use regulation table, Tom's and then yours, Judge Cutler.
Yeah, so I would divide it up so that there would be a table of principal uses. All right.
Right, you haven't done a version of it, but Tom did do a version with.
yeah,
I just
Different-
set them out because we don't know what uses are going to go where, and until we have the categories, it didn't make
yeah,
sense.
I think it will be helpful if the judge and I find time to sit down and kind of, I don't think we're at cross purposes here.
But yeah, rather than the committee, Tom, you think just
Yeah, I
Judge
think,
Cutler and you working all this stuff out is, and
I
then.
mean, I think we
Give
have to
us
go
a
through it once
way
we
to
have
go.
the categories. Once you
Yeah.
have the categories, you
well,
go
let,
through.
let me just, right, for tonight's purposes, we'll figure out the logistics of this, but it is difficult. I mean, my approach too has been not to, again, in selling this to town meeting is not to radically change where we can avoid radical change. And there's a lot of uses listed here.
Well, for tonight, does it make sense for each of you to go through the work, that product that you've created so that
Well, that's what I'm trying to
committee
do here.
understands what you're doing? Or,
Honestly, I don't think it's going to be productive to do it
Okay.
that way. Tom, I really think you have to start from the generalized and work. This is a very specific iteration of what the final result will be distilled down to. And it's more technical
All right.
than anything else. I think what we need to do is figure out, as to Tom's point earlier, that you want to reduce the numbers of categories, simplify them as much as possible so you don't have the situation where people are coming in and they don't know what use they have, or it's do they need a use variance or not? I think Woody was very concerned because you right now have a very catch-all provision, which, as I've advised you, is not legal, which is to allow a special permit for any use that isn't listed. So that's contrary to state law. So we have to get rid of that. So to accommodate it, I think what we talked about was to have much broader use categories that would encompass many different kinds of uses and would leave it open for other similar type uses to fit into the category. So,
Which, yes, which I agree with. And in practice, in comparing it to what we have and the kind of things we regulate, the broadest categories are here in the commercial uses.
well,
In my idea, I think in the
yes,
residential.
these are generally the categories. You're right.
Right, and in the residential, I think we do need to be more specific as our current bylaw is, and that's where these terms all come up.
Could I
It's
interject?
not 60, it's not, yes, Jack.
No, you go ahead and finish, but after I
No,
just.
I'm not. Go ahead, make your
Okay.
point.
I think it's clear that when the select board asked town council to become involved, what we asked them to do is to give us an overall framework that's consistent with the statutory ways in which other communities have done that. So I hear what Judge Cutler is saying, and that's consistent with what we asked her to do. And then once that broad framework is in there, that's when our local thing says, well, this needs to adjust for this because of Cohasset's this and that, or we have a need that is not necessarily identified or addressed. And I do think we want to move this along. So I think that we're using our town council for an overview. So I really think that it's much better that she sits down with you, Tom, and work this out, because we'll be here forever trying to do this in the committee thing. Does that make sense, Tom?
That's fine. I don't disagree. I was just simply trying to
I
give
know.
I have submitted all this, circulated all this stuff to you, and I was just trying to give an overview of what the approach was to it. I'm not trying to get into the weeds about it, okay?
Okay. Well, I think the overview that we are looking for, but anyway, can we, move on?
I looked at,
You and
I
Judge
looked at-
Cutler figure this out.
I looked at both tables and I think if Tom and Judge Cutler roll their sleeves up and work something out together, that
I
makes
didn't
sense. That's
prepare
a
a
good
table.
suggestion, but
Just so you know, no table has been prepared that
right,
has.
right, no, but Tom sent us his table. So
Yes.
I reviewed that before our meeting, and I also reviewed your general framework. And I would say with Tom's table, he has some zoning districts that don't exist right now, and there are existing zoning districts that do exist that aren't represented.
Right.
So I think that you should have a key, Tom, when you get to that point of revising that based on your meeting with the judge.
Right. So I don't want to waste the town's money. And so if this is going to be written by the committee, I'm happy to review it and comment. But I cannot have two or three different versions being discussed all at once.
We Judge Cutler, the select board, specifically requested you to do this in this manner precisely because we didn't want this situation to develop. And I don't see there's a real difference between what Tom is doing, what you're doing. So,
Well, it comes down to writing the damn bylaw at some point. And I don't want to get into this argument here. in a
yeah,
public
I know
meeting.
that it's pointless. So I think we can move
Well,
on.
it's not pointless, but
It isn't pointless, and I think right now, there are two perspectives, and I think the committee should consider both perspectives. One is to do what the bylaw currently does and treat all uses under one heading of uses that are allowed or allowed by special permit, whether they're accessory or principal. And that's what Tom's suggesting, and put them all on the table as is now bylaw. The other option that I offer is to address your principal uses, have a principal table, and address accessory uses where you don't really need a table because you're going to have by right. Accessory uses are very broad. And then you've got your specific ADUs and, bed and breakfast and things like that, which you get into more particular regulations on, so that you're distinguishing between principal and accessory. If the committee does not want to do that, we'll do it the way.
I don't know that my only comment on that is whether that's more confusing to have the uses in two different places, I guess.
Well, they're not in two different places. They're just two different articles. The confusion that I found, Tom, was looking at your current use table. One does not know when these things are allowed, whether they're allowed as a principal or an accessory use of property.
Yes, it is a mess. We all agree that the current is a mess.
So if you list single family house and then you list bed and breakfast establishment, is bed and breakfast an actual principal use, or is it an accessory to a dwelling? So we need to distinguish that, whichever direction you choose to
All
go.
right, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, but All right. You and I will need to find some time, I guess.
Yeah.
Because, unless,
And if you need my input as a registered architect with 30-something years of experience, let me know, or else just give us a finished product and we'll
I don't think we should, we're not at a finished product stage yet, really. This
no, I
needs
know
to
that. I
work
understand that.
on. think
I
Tom
understand that
has-
completely. I mean,
Yeah.
in the
I
future,
think we-
when you have a finished product, you
we
can
need,
ask what I
again,
think.
as we go forward with, the select board, the planning board, there are certain directions that this committee needs to establish for Judge Cutler and I to come up with a product. And that is, it seems like we're all in the consensus of having broad categories rather than micromanaged categories. Okay. Is the idea of breaking it down, fitting it into the format of our current table or breaking it down to primary accessory? I think that's fine.
Tom,
That's fine. That's a policy direction.
I think it's gonna
Then
be
there's,
for you guys to go through the weeds.
I know
And
that,
come
but
to us on the big questions of the organization, like what do you think makes the most sense?
yeah, well, those are questions that should probably be answered.
Well,
up
then if
front.
you wanna, I mean, this is what I do with clients all the time. I mean, I have the top 10 coordination questions on their project that they answer generally when we've already got some work product done. But, so you know what direction, you don't spin your wheels, waste time.
And that's what I'm trying to do, is get some direction on certain issues.
Are you trying to do that right now, Tom? Right now?
I would think
Or
it
do you
has
wanna
to,
write
I think
your
that
main
has to,
questions down and?
I think that has to come up front in the process, not at the tail end of the
I'm not
process.
suggesting at the tail end. I'm just saying, do you want to sit down with a judge over the phone and come up with your top 10, like go in this direction or that direction and then come back to the board?
All right, next meeting, we'll come back.
I mean, does that make sense in terms
That's
of?
fine, that's fine. Then the next meeting, some decisions, hard decisions on the direction of what Article 4 is going to look like are going to need to be made, and then we will work on what those details are and what the actual text of the article and the charts is going to be. That's going to be the longer process. I agree, but we need the direction on the structure of it first.
Well, then I think you need to present those questions so that they've been thought through with you and Judge Cutler.
Fine, all
So
right.
the first question is going to be, how do you want to divide or address the uses as a group, similar to how you have it now? Or do you want to distinguish between accessory uses and principal uses? That- I
What we
think that-
want to do,
The uses are principal and then 1% are accessory, sort of. I mean, generally it's what's as of right and what as a use and what isn't.
Well, the problem by listing specific accessory uses that are allowed by right is that you have this possibility of there may be other accessory uses that you haven't covered.
I get what you, I get what
it
you-
might be
Accessory
some
use, then
okay,
most uses are allowed by right, except these very specific uses that you've called out as being special permit accessory.
Right.
uses.
And it may be that having examples of those would illustrate the issue, so we know how to address it.
Yes, and that was my plan, was to have that to you by May 31st.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that we would be discussing this
No, no.
today.
Judge Cutler, what you're proposing isn't that the way that most towns do it?
Most times.
Is to have the primary and then the accessory, because then
Yeah.
most uses are engulfed within the primary uses, so that you're not out on an island, or you're not out on a branch sawing it off, because you can tie it to the primary. That's the key.
and that was the specific intent of the Board of Selectmen. We're dealing with a somewhat antiquated and patched together zoning code over how many years. And that's why we brought the town council in. Give us a code that is consistent with best practices across the Commonwealth, that attorneys and courts will recognize and see this structure. And we felt very strongly about it. And we also decided that we wanted to have the town do it through town council, because we did feel that it's a little, and thank you, Tom, for all your work.
Mm.
But part of this was very explicitly that we don't want to overwork our workhorses like you.
Tom's effort in what he
It's
gave us.
incredible.
I'm not looking
No,
for
no, no, no.
applause.
I'm
I'm
not
looking
talking about-
to, the principle for the last 2 years has been
Yes.
that this is going to be driven by the town. And it's the members of this board who represent the town. That's all. I'm not upset with the way the process has been going, but
Can we,
No, I think if I could just
no,
speak.
Jack, let me
Yes.
run the damn meeting, all right?
Liz wants to make a point.
If I could just make a point, I think thing is with the template that Judge Cutler gives us, from that we can cohasitize it and add the things and the accoutrements that we need to, make it more cohasset friendly. I mean, because we all agree that the current bylaw has just been added on and added on and added on, where it loses its meaning and structure totally. So I think we're saying the same things, just a way about going out. I think if you get the template for what Judge Cutler gives, then we can work with that and then figure out what bells and whistles we need to put into it.
All right, well, Doug Cutler and I will have to find time to sit down sooner rather than later, so, okay. All right, with that then, we don't have anything else to discuss tonight.
And I do have a couple things, but there's
Go
two
ahead.
versions of section 4. Are you guys gonna go through your two versions together and come up with
Every
one?
time I open my mouth, somebody's shooting it down. I'm not trying to.
No, I mean, you sent those today, Tom. The
Yeah,
two
I know, and I've
versions
sent
today.
them repeatedly in the past as well.
Okay,
I look,
Just,
all
you know-
I'm saying, the structure of Article 4 that I would appreciate a direction on is what I said at the beginning. Should all of the use-related articles of the bylaw be consolidated into Article 4? Yes or no? Now, there's another thing that came up, Judge Cutler, at least in one of the things your draft of 4 seemed to have a lot of definitions. And again,
They're not meant as definitions.
all
They're-
right, that you and I have to discuss. Yes, you and I have to discuss that because again, one of the founding principles of this for the last 2 years is not to have definitions all over the damn bylaw, is to have them in one place. But if that's, these are the 5, I'm just seeing this for the first time today, so that's fine, and we'll just work out those distinctions. But
Tom, I think in answer to your question, that it needs to be examined whether it's more mainstream and clearer from the other zoning bylaws in the Commonwealth to consolidate those or is there a nuance to a standalone section rather than stuffing everything into one zoning section?
well, if I'm looking for something, I'd like to find it in one place and not all over the place. I don't think there's a particular model of a perfect bylaw in the Commonwealth. They
There's
run the
better
gamut.
ones, there's easier ones to use and there's better.
Yeah, I know, they run the
There's
gamut.
newer ones. I mean, I think some of the towns that have new bylaws have kind of rethought how information is used and understood in this context
Yes,
and tried to create a model for improvement.
and the last act of the bylaw working group was to adopt, we were going to follow the approach of the chapter or article organization of Concord, which was down to 9 articles. Where we have 22. I mean, that was going to be the model, but whether that makes, but these are the directions that we need to know in actually writing the thing. We can't keep discussing this ad nauseum. At some point, we have to put pen to paper. I have tried to do that. The judge has tried to do that. We have to coordinate the 2 of those versions, and that's fine. But
Well, you sent this stuff today and I was prepared to make preliminary comments, but I'm not going to.
all right, that's
I want to bring
fine.
up a new point that I think is very important for
What's that?
our work. And that is the E Code 360 does not have the new bylaws referenced in them. There's a section for new laws, right? When you
Yeah.
click on E-code 360 Cohasset, there's new laws. There's two that are in there that have that passed at December of last year's
Yep.
town meeting.
Yep.
Now we have 5 new zoning articles that passed town meeting, and I think they should be put on there and also referenced as whether they have not received Attorney General approval yet, but I still think they should be there so that people designing houses and buildings right now using our zoning bylaws should have access to the height change information. And now they currently don't. In town meetings, what was that? That was like 3.5 weeks ago. I think there's no reason not to put it up, make the caveat the Attorney General hasn't weighed in yet, so that people working and designing buildings, engineers and architects have access to that information. And it's not, once they finish drawings, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
the thing changed.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, when Lauren was around, we talked about how we were gonna deal with the company who runs E360.
Well, that's
And
another-
that's typical, it's
another
typical.
subject. We know it takes a long time for them, but we should get a schedule on after the Attorney General's approval, when they can get.
That's the
bylaw update.
question. That's the question. Does E360 do that after Attorney General approval, or will they do it sooner?
Can I speak to that?
Cassandra, yeah, go ahead.
So I've been working with the town clerk, Lisa, and I know that she has sent information to the E360 company in regards to what was passed at town meeting. So they should have that information, but I don't know if they wait to put it up until they've had the AG's approval or not, but I can check with her on that tomorrow.
Well, I would be in favor of having it accessible when you click on the E-code 360, with the caveat that the Attorney General hasn't weighed in yet.
Right,
And
I
if-
can relay that to her and just see if that's an option.
Yeah, and if they can't
Other
do that,
members think.
if they can't do that, we'll have to just post those things in that interim period somewhere else.
We could put them on the planning board website, or the zoning board of appeals website,
Yeah.
or the building department website, or all three, I guess.
We could do it on all of those regardless of what the answer
Yeah,
with the
yeah, we
360
could, but
is. I
let's,
think that's a good
see.
idea.
Let's first answer the question of 360, if they can do it with the caveat.
I mean,
And
I think it should exist. They should be
I have never seen it.
immediately with.
I have never seen it in this town or another town posted with the caveat. I think they do wait until there's AG approval. But there's no reason we should, there's no reason we
That
can't
would be
make
what I'd
it.
recommend, but let's find
Yep.
out.
Yeah, and no reason we can't put it up and should put it up elsewhere, so.
Is there anything else we've got on the agenda as well, or is that it?
No,
I have a question.
that's it.
Judge Cutler, you have something?
Yeah, I had a question, and that is in preparation for future meetings, and taking into account that we more than likely will be reducing the number of categories on the list, whether it's accessory and principal or just principal. I would ask that you give some consideration to the suggested descriptions of the use categories that I provided in my draft, just to see if you think they make sense, they cover everything you think they should cover, they're redundant, they're unnecessary, they're wrong, whatever, you know, your commentary is.
Do you want us to email comments after having reviewed your document?
Yeah, you can
hold
email
on.
the comments, you can save them up for the next, meeting, however, let Cassandra and Tom know, however,
Mhm.
just because I think we want to tie down what uses we are including, and you will see that the categories I've proposed may have some uses that are not current. That I tried to list all of the uses that you have. And that's why I gave you the chart, so you sort of show where they wound up in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
But there are also some additional uses. These are the exempt uses that I discussed
Yeah.
in the diagnostic thing.
Yeah. Here is,
yeah.
here it is, folks. Here is the judge's chart, just so you see it.
And then the descriptions are in the Article 4 draft that you got.
Yeah.
So you'll see where veterinary hospital is described in that group. And are they grouped properly, or should they be grouped differently? And so this is like really just a discussion document to see whether we can reduce and classify uses in a way that is reasonable and logical and sort of user friendly, so people can figure out what the heck they have there and what's allowed. And I think once we have categories, I think it'll be easier to fill in the chart that in the format that Tom's suggesting, but we can fill in the chart better when we know what each use really represents when we're talking about it. And just after I printed this out, it came to my mind because I was driving down the street and I saw doggy daycare, and I'm like, well, what category would that go into? Is it
Yeah.
allowed? Is it not allowed? Is it,
Yeah, and I mean, and my only thought is consolidating that further, not, again, that, I think, with animal, marine and everything, I created a broad category where we wouldn't even get into the splitting hairs of a kennel versus a veterinarian, or, there were some distinctions, but again, we have to decide how broad is the right way to go.
Well, I think it would be very helpful that if we were to do this, because this really fits in the overall broad framework, and this is our local knowledge, which we make sure gets incorporated in that. So I think it's a good idea, and I urge all of us to assist everybody in getting this done.
All right, Cassandra, what's the calendar look like for June? Did we set any dates yet?
I've not set any dates yet.
Oh.
Let me look now.
I am away from June 18th to July 4th.
That's why Zoom is a wonderful thing.
I don't know
Good
about
break.
this. I don't know about this one, Tom. I'm gonna be in Egypt, so that it's a 7-hour
Ooh.
difference.
you don't want to get up early in the morning.
Yeah. Let's see. It's
Yeah.
right
It was-
now it's 7 hours ahead, so it's yeah. I don't know if I'm gonna wake up at 4 in the morning for this one.
Okay. Give us some examples of zoning from Cairo.
Right.
Well, all right. So
Yes.
so Tuesday, the 6th is a Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
The 6th is a Tuesday.
Okay.
Correct.
I might suggest we meet on the 5th, the night before, to both prepare for that and maybe have some refinements on Article 4. Is that possible? And that,
I don't have any other meetings that night.
can that be live? Can we find a place to meet live, whether it's the library meeting room?
Actually, I'm going to be in Boston on that day, so it's easy for me to just, come down.
We'll,
And as I
we'll,
said, I
we'll
would not
even-
charge you for my travel time on that one.
well, we'll
Um,
take you out to dinner, so we have some.
Pending
fine
the
dining-
availability of a room,
Yeah.
I'm sure we could figure that out.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a grand room. It could be the smaller meeting room in the Wilcott. It could be the library meeting room. It could be the basement of town hall.
Yeah,
Dear-
because-
That room's not available anymore.
Yeah,
but
that's a
I can look
goner.
into some other rooms and
Yeah.
figure that out.
Sandra, does it conflict with a select board meeting?
No, the
No, that's a
select board
Monday
meeting's
evening.
the next night. So
Can we? No, I thought you said Tuesday.
Tuesday, we are meeting with the selectmen.
Oh,
Select-
right.
He's looking to meet
That's
on
the
Monday.
joint. Yeah.
So that the bylaw
okay.
committee will have its regular meeting on the 5th. And then as for later in the month, it would depend on a Monday or Wednesday where we're not conflicting with the planning board.
For the rest of the month, with
Well,
holidays and staff, other engagements, you're looking at either probably Wednesday, the 14th, or you could
Oh.
do Monday, the 26th, or Wednesday, the 28th.
Yeah, the 14th would probably be too soon. Is Juneteenth now an official holiday?
Yes, and that's Monday, the 19th,
I heard that.
which is why that's out.
I don't know if the courts are closed, but I heard town halls are closing. So.
Yes.
All right, well, we'll meet on the 5th and then we'll decide that night. It kind of depends on what we accomplish on the 5th, actually.
Yeah.
We'll meet with the select board, and again, the topics will be housing choice, perhaps directions on the harbor, and probably the larger game plan of what would be brought forward in the fall. And we will have further ongoing meetings with them as we go along. We're not going to leave everybody to the last minute like the normal town meeting schedule. To which end I spoke to Woody again and have asked him again if his board would provide a representative to this committee once again. They will take that up and let me know as soon as possible. We still have 2 seats. We should have a 7-member committee. Like at our last meeting, there was only 3 of us. We almost didn't have a quorum. So, it would be good to have 7 people. I reached out to one individual who I'm waiting an answer on and to the zoning board, and we'll see. But, if anybody else has any recruits, feel free to suggest them.
And also, if you do have recruits, feel free to have them talk to me. I'd be glad to talk to them, explain what it's all about. And if you give me a little bit, background, glad, that might be helpful.
Yeah, okay. All right, so if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Zachary, aye.
I'm Callahan, aye.
David Farrar guy.
All right, thank you all. And again, congratulations to Cassandra.
Thank you.
Don't let the title go to your head.
I will not.